Oh, it's a gentle journey.
And that's Series 5, Episode 5.
Yeah, it's been a little time since we were at Speyside, and we've all been away, and that's why there's a little delay on this next episode. But yeah, great to be back in recording our fifth episode, and we've all been out and about, haven't we?
We have. The ambassadorial team have been ambassadoring, if that's the active verb. I'm not too sure, but it's been great, Gordon. I've been down in London, down to the big city, the bright lights.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've been in Chicago, New York, and you've also been in Wishaw, and we've got a smorgasbord. We're talking to really a smorgasbord of people, aren't we?
We have really got one of the biggest number of. That's why we can't hang about with some of the regular features. We just want to get into these interviews, including Hollywood royalty, Oscar nominated, no less.
We do. I mean, we're having a bit of a. Is this the most famous person we've ever had on the podcast? And I know that we've had Joanna Lumley, but I think it'd be interesting to see whether what the reaction is to this Oscar-nominated, very, very famous actor from. I'll give you a little hint from the film Fargo. So let's start with you. You were down at the weekend with. Oh, first of all, sorry, Gordon. What are you drinking?
Of course, yes, and it will become apparent during the show. I'm drinking a Rieger's from Kansas City, established 1887. It's 46% alcohol, and it is corn, malt, and rye with a trace amount of dry sack 15-year-old Oloroso Especial Sherry.
And you will see in maybe a bit of the interviews that we talk about later, this whiskey was why we got the interviews we got, and it was all to do with the sherry connection. But we'll come back to that. That's from Kansas City, Missouri. Not Kansas City, Kansas. I got a slight geography lesson there, but very nice. I tasted it in America. Very, very nice whiskey.
It is very nice, Gordon. Nice little spicy kick to that there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll come back to Jay Rieger from Kansas. I'm drinking, well, I had to, the new Legacy Chapter 3, Glencairn Legacy Series Chapter 3. Hugely successful first series, which was, the first one was pretty much European oak forward. The second one very much bourbon cask forward. And this one I think the best way to describe it is American oak forward. Bourbon 20%, 30-odd% of American oak sherry, just a little bit under 10% of European oak, and the rest is refills. So I think, as a sort of, you always get a hint of that fabulous, the vanillas of European oak, but there's that spiciness that comes through on the nose, a little bit of that cinnamon stick. 48% as well, which makes it utterly mixable, add with a drop of water as well. But on the palate, just thick, satisfying raisins, spice, sort of cinnamon buns, and just a beautiful creamy style to it. We'd love a bit of water as well. So the third in the series, all about, and you can give us a little insight into this, all about a gentleman called Tedder.
Arthur John Tedder, born 1861, arrives at Glencairn as an excise man in the year 1889 and stays for 3-4 years, goes up to Elgin, finally works his way back down to London, becomes the chief head of the UK excise. And in the very famous case of 1908-1909, which is called the What is Whisky case, he is the first witness cited, first witness called. And we're not going into details, Gordon. I'd love to do a year that changed whisky. I can't believe I have not done that. But this parliamentary commission, 37 sittings with Arthur John Tedder, who was knighted for his contribution to this royal commission, laid down the founding groundwork of what actually whisky was.
So defining what the rules of it are now.
Correct. The first legal definition.
I think
Irish were on one side of the debate, and some Scots saying it should really only be pot still whisky. And the Scotch industry saying, no, whisky can be pot still and grain based as well. And Arthur John Tedder was influential.
And he cut his teeth at Glencairn. There we go.
And did you know, very quickly, he introduced the world's first old age pension. He was responsible for that as well.
God, he's done a lot, hasn't he? Brilliant. Well, I think we should do a bit more of that in a coming episode, because that's a very interesting story.
Yes.
So let's get on the shuttle. Let's fly from Glasgow to London. You're in London. You're at Whisky Live. What was it like?
Yep, great. First day was about trade. So it's all the people in the licensed trades, whether it's distribution or selling it to the public. They come in the first day. This was day 2, and day 2 was open to the public. Wonderful place, as you will hear, because Christopher describes where we are. And round about halfway through, I managed to get an interview with the, really, would you say, Gordon, the organizer and the editor of Whisky Magazine.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I actually worked for Whisky Magazine. Chris joined just after I left, so he's been there pretty much 10 years, and he's a huge whiskey enthusiast. He came with us to Jerez when we talked about sherry for Tamdhu. He's a great guy to get he's got a full understanding of the industry because of his position at Whisky Magazine, and it's always good to hear from him. And he loves the stuff. So Chris Coates, editor of Whisky Magazine.
Here he goes.
Well, my name's Christopher Coates. I'm the editor of Whisky Magazine, and we're here at the Honourable Artillery Company in London for Whisky Live London, the first in a couple of years, because obviously we had a slight hiatus of whisky events that everybody knows about, and we don't need to talk any more about. But so the reason I'm here is that Whisky Live, which is celebrating its 21st anniversary, was originally founded as Whisky Magazine Live. It's a good pub quiz fact that not everyone can remember, and pretty much as the brand started growing and Whisky Live started partnering with other people around the world and became a sort of global whiskey festival brand, we dropped the magazine, it became Whisky Live, and the rest is history. And now Whisky Live is the world's largest whiskey festival brand. I think at the last count, certainly pre-COVID, I think we're in 53 cities. I think it's dropped a little bit now, but it's certainly on its way back up again.
And just a quick explanation of this place that we're in. I'll try and put some photographs up, but yeah, why did you choose this place?
Well,
why have you chosen this place?
Well, the Honourable Artillery Company, I mean, so it's if you haven't seen it, I'll try and describe it to you. I mean, it's a beautiful old mansion house right in the heart of the city of London. It's got one of the largest sort of like private green spaces as well. It's a beautiful old historic building packed full of sort of military paraphernalia and curiosities, stained glass windows, lots of wood panelling. It's a very beautiful sort of opulent place to be. It also has a large drill hall, which is where the Whisky Festival is actually held, and we've been here. I've been with the business 9 years, and we'd been doing it here a few years before that. So we've been here quite a while, and it just works really well.
It gives a wee flavour of 2022.
So Whisky Live London is popular for one very particular reason, which is that we attract a lot of global whisky brands here. So I think, particularly for sort of dyed-in-the-wool whisky fans that have done every festival, there's perhaps sometimes a bit of cynicism about I've tasted every whisky, I've had all the core ranges from every brand. So and what I would say is you should try Whisky Live London, because we are almost exclusively what I would call small to medium-sized brands on offer here. So it's a lot of independents, a lot of new starts from around the world, some very, very established distillers, but generally the sort of smaller ones. So, you can taste things like Bruichladdich and Waterford, Tamdhu, Glencairn. We have Rampur, Indian single malt, Stauning, they're here as well, and they've been very, very popular. Some of the new Irish independents as well, like Clancola are here, and I think that's definitely the feedback we always get from whisky fans that attend this event, is that you can think you've tasted every whisky, and then you come here and actually you've almost definitely not tried 90% of what's in that hall.
That's really nice. Now, can I have so much to talk about? Can I move forward to the magazine?
Yeah.
Big fan of the magazine. Really enjoy it. I've really enjoyed your editorials as well.
Thank you.
And the other opinion pieces in there, really nice. Some historical as well. I did like. And I want to speak about the one possibly coming up, if you can give us a little preview. But you have mentioned previously, whisky should be fun. Let's not forget that. And I love that article. And also try and keep it affordable. So, I mean,
this is my sort of regular editor's word piece. And I have to say, I've been in the industry now for nearly 10 years. And I've avoided, until very, very recently, ever publishing anything opinion based. I think when you're working with people whose average service time in the industry sort of 20 years is considered a whippersnapper still. That means that sort of peeking your head above the parapet is a bit daunting. But I'm equally very opposed to publishing fluff. That's not what our what Whisky Magazine is there to do. Our brief is celebrating the world of whiskey, but also we're we have a duty to be calling out trends, things that we're noticing. We have a unique global overview. It's very different from working for one whiskey company where you get this depth into one particular distillery or one particular company. We could be I joke with people quite often, one day I could be reading about, Speyside single malt Scotch whiskey, about as, traditional as it gets. And the next day I could be reading about, farming practices in Idaho and how that's influencing the local whiskey making scene. It's very, very varied. But anyway, in the opinion pieces, the two that you've referenced there, one was, there was a scuffle at a whiskey shop in London when people were queuing up to get rare bottles that were just being released. There was a similar incident at a whiskey festival in Scotland where it wasn't quite scuffles, but people were getting very loud and obnoxious and getting very upset because they didn't get the bottles they want. I've also met a lot of people who sort of get genuinely quite angry, in the way that people get, if their football team doesn't win or something, genuinely enraged because they got sniped at the end of a whiskey auction. And I could see all these people getting so stressed out about whiskey and seeing it as a way to make money as a side hustle and things. And don't get me wrong, I understand that we're in relatively dire economic circumstances, and a lot of people, are needing to supplement their income. So I'm not, I'm perfectly understanding of that. But I also don't think I believe that that's what these people are doing. I think this is people who have money, they can take the risk, they're speculating on bottles, and they're not sort of really in the spirit of it. So anyway, what I was talking about is the fact that, just a reminder that, to any readers that were reading that editorial, that, if you recognize yourself in any of these sort of things I'm describing, just take a step back. There's it's easy to get sort of shoved onto the hype train behind certain whiskies and be like, oh my God, I need to add this to my collection, or I need to buy that. And it's you don't. There is quite literally more amazing whiskey out in the world right now than there ever has been in human history, right? Yeah. There's so much stuff that flies under the radar, and that's not just from the new boutique brands either. There are large whiskey companies out there that that some of the ones where it's almost like a national pastime to sort of complain about them, that are releasing whiskies from massive brands, particularly blended whiskey, that nobody gets excited about them. Nobody gets hyped up about it. And you think, but actually, some of this is genuinely some of the best whiskey that that I've tasted. Equally, you've got new distillers who are releasing stuff. I had, and I'll call this out specifically. I tried the Wireworks whiskey from White Peak Distillery in England the other day, and I tasted it blind, and I would never have guessed that was sort of 3 years and a day whiskey. I mean, genuinely complexity, maturity, and not a high entry price point either. And I was thinking, there is quality out there. You don't need to fight over it. So anyway, so the next piece that's just about to publish is about the fact that the next generation of whiskey makers, marketers, ambassadors, even salespeople are sort of coming through. I feel like there's more than any other point in my career, I'm very keenly aware that there's this sort of change of the guard happening. So people are retiring, new people are stepping into sort of the top jobs, the agenda-setting jobs, whether that be marketing strategy, sales strategy, whiskey making strategy, whatever it is. And I've heard from a lot of different distillers that there is a situation arising where the new guard aren't getting the same kind of exposure or training, length of training periods that their predecessors had. So quite a lot of the top whiskey makers, for example, they did 15 years or 20 years of apprenticeship before they took on the top job. And some of the people that are about to move into these roles or have recently moved into these roles, were trying to get the sum total of their predecessors' experience sort of handed to them in a quarter of that time or less, that, and it's not possible. You can't pass that on. So one of the things that I'm a big advocate for is actually getting these people recorded, like we're doing now, which is where I'm going to.
This is why I'm so onto this.
This is why I'm going to congratulate you. I think you're doing a great service here because, this stuff. I know that there's some people internally, some people that hold the purse strings that would go, oh, it's not a commercial activity, it's very time consuming. Yeah, creating great content is time consuming. It's a specialist skill. Like obviously I'm going to say that in my line of work, but it doesn't have to cost tens of thousands of pounds or millions of pounds to capture and archive the living history that we have the privilege to still be exposed to. Particularly people who are in the industry and maybe joined very young, sort of like 16, 17, during the post-war boom, whiskey boom, they have stories and they have an understanding of the way the industry historically worked, which, it's a completely different world. It's the industry is almost unrecognizable to what they experienced. And what I'm worried about is that pretty soon, even silly things like the stories where they go, oh yes, this still was the funny one and you had to run it differently from the rest, and actually it's because the sun came through onto it and that meant that it warmed up during this, or whatever it is, whatever the small anecdote is, or the story about the postman that would time his route so that he could get there at dramming time at every distillery. Little things like this are becoming second-hand stories. And as soon as something becomes a second-hand story, you start getting inaccuracy creeping in, and things turn from historical record into sort of myth, legend, and anecdote. And what I believe very, very strongly in is that there needs to be a sort of mass industry-wide, and I'm not just talking in Scotland, I'm talking in the States, Japan particularly as well, because they're in a very similar position because of the age of their industry now, where these people just need to be sat down no matter what area of the business they're in, and they need to be given a day where they're just recorded, ideally with video, because with video, if you do later want to use that to communicate, to share with the world, you can put captions on it, and I believe that is, it's not only more accessible and opens it up to more English-speaking audiences, but also internationally, if you're going to put that out, people that don't speak English, need to be able to have subtitles, and you can't subtitle a podcast, but at the very, but at the very least, get the audio recorded, because there's information and there are stories that we're going to lose if we don't get that done now.
We've lost so many, I think. And one thing this industry in Scotland has got is that's heritage. We're losing
exactly.
It. Christopher, magazine's absolutely wonderful. For anybody listening here, where did they get it? Can you get it online?
So you can subscribe online at whiskymag.com. There are almost always sort of subscription deals going on, so you can check that out. Just click the subscribe button and you'll be
nice little whiskies delivered to me.
Ah, well, that's true. Yes, so I believe that might still be running. It might still be running. It was for UK-based subscribers. If you subscribed for an annual for the year, you were sent through little miniatures as well. So well, I hope you enjoyed them. I'm glad you liked it.
Let's get back into the whiskey festival.
Let's get in and taste some whiskey.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
For having me on. Cheers.
Oh, that was London. Lovely time, Gordon. You've done Whisky Live, and it's just great to get people in a room. But what a place! And it's not open to the public, but that was
the Honourable Artillery Company. Yes. Fabulous, isn't it? Beautiful. Really right in the heart of this, just very near the Tower of London. Beautiful place. And I
have to say, if you've never had a weekend with Sandy McIntyre, it's
early to bed, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's very boring, very dull.
Very good, very good. So then you ended up in, I think I could say, really South Lanarkshire. Would that be fair?
That's right. It's a place that the locals call Wishy, and the people that don't know it call it Wishaw. And it's not really in the whiskey map, but there is a restaurant there called the Artisan.
Ah, yes.
Run by a gentleman called Derek Mather.
Yep.
And I can't remember, Gordon, I'll replay an interview, but there's 2,300 whiskies on the gantry you can choose from. You've got to scan a QR code and you can down your phone and choose just under 2.5. And in total, in that restaurant, there's 3,500 whiskies, and it's growing.
I have been to this restaurant, and if you haven't been, it is a little bit out of the way, if I'm honest, but when you get there, his hospitality is fabulous. His food is fabulous. You will not leave hungry. I'm intrigued to hear what he's got to say.
Well, here we are. It's what's that? Wednesday, May the 18th. And can I ask who you are and where we are?
You're in Wishaw at Artisan Restaurant, and I'm Derek Mather.
And we have audience behind us. Derek, how did it go tonight? Some great foods, and could you explain what your place? You've been on the podcast before, but just give us a quick explanation of what the Artisan is and what you're trying to achieve.
Trying to educate people about whiskey. We're crazy about whiskey, so why not try and promote it?
And tonight was an Ian MacLeod tasting.
Ian MacLeod tasting with Tamdhu, Glencairn, Pig's Nose.
6 hours was very
6
nice.
hours as well. No, it was a very good night.
Now, how many whiskies? I'm going to try and take a few photographs for the website. How many whiskies are here? Because I believe there's a new system now with a QR code.
There's a QR code. The QR code are the open bottles, so there's like 2,400 opened. There's 3,700 in the restaurant.
What's a snapshot in the last, say, year of what's been popular?
They've all been popular. Normally, quite a few Spacesides, a lot of sherry drams, a lot of younger people now getting into whiskey, so they're going for the sweeter drams. So your Tamdhu, your Glengoynes are all going. Balvenie Double Woods, always very popular. I try and stay away from Macallan because I think it's overpriced. And lots of Bruichladdich.
And the people, international visitors, have been thinning the ground, I'd imagine, the last couple of years.
Last couple of years, yeah, because the world fell to Keith.
Yeah.
But now they're all coming back. We've got people from Vienna in tomorrow night. I've got people in from Israel on Saturday. I've got Germans on Sunday.
And people know this place. Can you just explain about Wishaw? Because people know Chicago, New York, they know London, but Wishaw, could you explain where it is in the world? And
it's right in between Glasgow and Edinburgh, if you can imagine Beirut, but with a Scottish accent. Then you'll find Wishaw, you'll find Artisan in the middle of it.
So there's a website for people to check?
Yeah, there's a website, there's a Facebook page as well. So the Facebook page is Artisan Wishaw, the website is obviously artisan-restaurant.co.uk.
And if you had to do a flight of whiskey, people thinking, I quite fancy that. What would be a nice flight of whiskey? Say, give us 5 whiskies that you maybe put a flight on for someone.
Flight of whiskies. Well, obviously we'd mix it up between peaty, sherry, bourbon, so we'd probably go maybe start off a Glengoyne 10, maybe do a Balvenie Double Wood, possibly last dram would be like a Delilah or a Port Charlotte. Try and do an unpeated Isla, so maybe a Bruichladdich or a 12-year-old Bunnahabhain, and then maybe throw something from out in the world, something different, maybe like a milk and honey from Israel or something from France or Germany.
Yeah, we curveball. Listen, we've got no time to talk because it's been a wonderful night.
Yep.
And I'm going to say goodbye to these lovely people, but thank you, Derek, for a wonderful evening tonight.
No problem.
Many good luck and congratulations with the Artisan Restaurant.
Cool, thank you very much.
A great night. It's great to do things on Zoom, but when you're in smell the food and people are having a good laugh and the chef comes out and the whiskies are pouring, it's just phenomenal. So I would heartily recommend anyone coming to Scotland pop into the Artisan.
You can't beat it. You cannot beat it. We are, whiskey is a social thing, and that's why meeting people and enjoying it. And I noticed that when I was away in the States, it's so important. So
right, Gordon,
fabulous. So
I've been one of these special episodes. We get no time to hang about and do our little challenges and little curiosities, as we call them. Take us to America.
Well, I went to America about 2.5 weeks ago, and really the reason we went to America was to really we hadn't been over there. It was important, I think, to reconnect with the people that sell our products, but also the consumer at the end, and to get an understanding of there are challenges in the market over there in terms of what we see here in terms of supply and distribution and things like that. But it was important for us to get over there. So I spent a few days in Chicago, and then I also spent a few days in New York, which was really good with our team over there. So firstly, I met a couple of our guys that we've been working with for 2 years on teams, and I met Mike Smith and was like, Mike's our guy in California. And I was like, oh my God, you're a lot taller than I thought you were. He says, well, I've only ever been sitting down, to be fair. So that was great. But yeah, in Chicago, I caught up with some very old friends. And we started our trip by going to an event at Binny's, which is the biggest retailer in Chicago. And while I was there, I met a very famous, interesting person called William H Macy. Have you heard of Mr. Macy?
I have. I am very familiar with Mr. Macy's work. Yeah, and it's one of these. He's a character actor, so he pops up in so many American and Hollywood movies, much more than you would think, but really well known for. I think a lot of people know him from the American Shameless now.
Absolutely. And he, like a fabulous guy, and just really, he's representing a bourbon he's involved with called Woody Creek. Look, I'm not going to say any more. Just listen to the Oscar-nominated William H Macy. So we're here at Binny's World of Whiskey, and I'm here with acclaimed actor William H Macy. Fabulous to meet you, and fabulous. Good to see you drinking a Tamdhu. Tell me what you think at the end. Now, you're here because you have a whiskey of your own. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about it?
I now live in Woody Creek, Colorado, and the two owners live on either side of me. One morning I woke up and they had planted corn in one of my fields, and after a while they asked me to be their spokesperson. My official title is spokesdude, and I've been touting this whiskey for about 4 years now, and it's such a great product. It's a shoo-in for me because I love everything about alcohol.
So, I'd say I do as well. So what do you think makes it stand out? You obviously got with bourbon, you got the high amount of corn in the mash bill. What else do you think is the things that make it a little bit different?
It's not a cliche. It's 100% Colorado. All the ingredients, with the exception of some of the flavors in the gin, it's 100% sourced out of Colorado. Their distillery is the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. They're two German pot stills that are 2 stories high, and the finishing machines and the mash machine, and it's all gleaming copper and stainless steel in a really cool building.
Isn't making whiskey just fabulous?
It's so romantic. And Dave, our master distiller, is here, and every once in a while, it goes through all of these stills, and then there's a little place where it goes into basically a cup before it goes in, and he every once in a while goes over, takes a little bit. I love the nomenclature of distilling, the whiskey thief and the angel share. I love all of that. I find it so romantic. And whiskey, it predates writing.
Of course. I mean,
we made beer before we made bread.
Exactly. No, absolutely. And obviously, I'm from Scotland, another great producing country of whiskey. Have you ever been to Scotland?
I have, briefly in Edinburgh. I was seeing plays.
Well, the next time you're in Scotland, if you are, and I'll give you my card, we'd love to welcome you to Glencairn Distillery, or even Tamdhu. It'd be great, and we can show you how we do it.
I'm there like a bear at the fair. All the boys in Woody Creek, we've been talking about a trip to Scotland for about 2 years now. It'll happen.
You are welcome to our distillery. So
I want your card, and I'll see you there.
Sort that out. It's great here to be back, seeing people. I mean, it's been a heck of a 2 years for everybody.
I know.
Isn't it great? That's what whiskey's about, socializing.
I know. You can feel it, too, the corks out of the bottle, so to speak. I'm so sick of this pandemic, I can't tell you.
Me too.
And I worked through it, and the protocols when you're shooting a movie or on a play are so rigid.
I know. It must have been tough. Well, I'm going to have a little taste of your Woody Creek. It looks a fantastic range. You've got.
What do you drink? I'm a rye drinker.
I love rye.
I grew up in Georgia, so I was a bourbon drinker, and this rye
I'm going to try
changed my life.
I'll get a glass.
Get a glass.
I'll get a glass and I'll come and try your rye. Look, thank you for being on our podcast. It's been, fabulous. We're just a little podcast, but we just spread the word of whiskey. I'm a huge fan of your work, Shameless, and as well as, of course, Fargo, one of my favorite films. So, a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for talking to me.
Enjoy the Tamdhu.
All righty. It's delicious.
Oh, and the Oscar for Best Interview goes to Gordon Das William H Macy for Binny's. Yay!
Thank you. I want to thank my mom and dad. I want to thank everybody. Thank you very much. On the stand next door to Mr. Macy, and what was very interesting, just before we move on, there was a lot of bourbons at the show. There's a lot of bourbons in America, a lot of companies producing bourbon or should I say promoting bourbon, and not necessarily producing it. It's a flooded market, and I think longer term it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I love a bourbon, but it gets to the point it's quite a narrow category. Yeah, so you're a little bit like.
Why did you just say the difference between producing and promoting?
Well, some bourbons are made by another company that people put their label on. It's right. A fact that people know about, and some people have arrangements that they'll get that bourbon produced for them until they have enough of their own. Yeah. And that is a way the bourbon industry has worked, and it's sort of out there in the open now. But it's interesting to see how this will move forward. And I think when you've got, that Woody Creek was absolutely gorgeous. I'd buy a bottle of that tomorrow. I know what you're drinking, the J. Rieger, brilliant too.
Really nice.
But if I'm honest, and they're not all bourbons, but if you drink a bourbon, the taste profile is pretty narrow compared to Scotch, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And it'll be interesting to see how things go. But there really is a lot of producers. So, but next door to William H Macy was a fellow Scot, a fellow Scottish producer, and it's a distillery we've not really covered that much. And I wanted to just get his sort of background on it. Torabhaig, which is the new distillery on Skye. So we have Talisker on Skye, obviously the one everybody thinks of, but Torabhaig is the new kid on the block and producing cracking single malt. And Neil was over there promoting it. So I'm here at World of Whiskies at Binny's in Chicago, and I've come across a fellow single malt. We're at the Torabhaig stand, and would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Yes, Neil Mathieson. I'm the whiskey maker at Torabhaig, and it's great to be here in Chicago. Do you know how hot it is now?
It is very hot here in Chicago, actually. I had some colleagues who were here 3 weeks ago, and it was snowing. But now it's very hot. Neil, how's everything going at Torabhaig? Just very exciting times for you.
Very, very exciting. I think we've now had our 5th birthday, and we're now looking at the whiskey and thinking to ourselves that we're doing pretty well. We've got a single cask 5-year-old, which will be a high point of our distilling and bottling, coming out in about a month's time.
Sounds fantastic, and I have to make sure I come and visit the distillery. And if you're on Skye, of course, there's 2 distilleries on Skye now, so make sure you visit Torabhaig. For those who maybe don't know, what would you say the house style is of the whiskey?
Well, we call it well-tempered peat, and that's because we're not aiming for the high aromatics of Laphroaig or the earthiness of Lagavulin, but we're tempering it in our little fat small stills. We have a historic building, so they didn't allow us to build the stills that we could have had. So it's a product of the distillery, which I hope is what every other Scotch whisky distillery is.
And what's the annual capacity?
500,000 litres.
That's pretty significant, actually. It's not that small.
It's not that small, but I'd like to see us sell some of it soon.
Of course. And how long are you in town? Are you here for Whiskey Fest as well tomorrow night?
Yes, 3 days hard slog with the Chicagoans. I think my team is taking me out from 10 o'clock to 10 o'clock every day.
Sounds like a hard slog. Neil, thank you for being on Whiskey Unscripted, and great to hear about Torabhaig.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, that was great, Gordon. And I've just mentioned about the 6 Isles, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And that single malt from those 6 islands, including Skye, fabulous.
Great.
We then obviously. I'm going to take you to probably Chicago's most famous whiskey bar. This is a bar that I've known since I've been in the industry. Everybody sort of knows it. If you're in Chicago, I strongly recommend you go to it. It's called Delilah's. North Chicago, about 15-minute drive from the city center, and it's almost like a sort of biker bar. It's a sort of I don't know the word, but it has the most amazing selection of whiskies, and everybody goes there after any whiskey events in Chicago. And a very famous bar, run by a very good friend of mine and big character in the industry, Mike Miller, who is a huge Scotch fan, huge bourbon fan, and I've met him many, many times, and he's been over to Scotland and things like that. And he's a big character and hugely influential in whiskey in Chicago. So I thought while I was in there having a dram or two after the Binny's event on Thursday, I'd just catch a quick word with Mike for the podcast.
Gordon, you never stop working.
I know.
Eh? Is this some secret overtime that I don't know about? This is over and above. Oh, brilliant, Gordon. Take it away.
This is like going to Mecca.
Okay, so we're here in Delilah's on a Thursday evening just before Whiskey Fest.
and I'm here with, an old friend of mine, Mike Miller. Mike, great to be back here. I've just been speaking to a gentleman outside. He was telling me about the place around the corner that does slingers. But do you remember that night? Mike, firstly, how the are you?
You know, Gordo, I'm fabulous. I'm hanging out here at Delilah's, some fabulous friends. Therefore, I'm fabulous.
Now, Mike,
remember that night, though, Gordo?
I do remember that night. Yeah,
we took over all the seats at the diner. We all had slingers. We all got our certificates of completion.
We did.
And I dropped George off at the Hyatt.
I know. I was there.
He didn't have any luggage or ID. And the people at the Hyatt said, Mr. Grant, we can't check you into your hotel room because you don't have any identification. And he pulled out his
certificate
of completion of eating his slingers. And they checked him into the Hyatt.
Never laughed so much. Very funny. Very
big
funny.
Night, yeah.
Very funny.
Whiskey week, buddy.
We've done some really good shit over the last few years, but I mean, it's good to be back here. It's good to see you. How long have you had this iconic bar?
Seems like forever, Gordo. 29 years. 29 years.
Wow, that's amazing. 29 years.
Yeah. Tell my liver.
And,
we have livers because they're for a living.
So for anybody who's never been to Chicago, if you want to come and drink really some amazing whiskeys and drams and anything,
have a good time.
And have a great time, come to Delilah's.
Yeah. It's all about having a good time. It's about brotherhood, sisterhood. It's about community. It's about engagement. The whiskeys are about sharing and having fun. And I don't know about you, but I'm willing to buy 1,000 whiskeys and put them on the shelf and share them. And everybody comes in and just pays their share.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It's not about money. It's about having a good time and sharing. And if it ever becomes about something else, then we've all missed the point.
So that's Mike Miller. What a character he is, and just loves sharing whiskey. It's all about the social aspect for him. So like everybody, the last 2 years has been difficult. Now, also in the bar, and I couldn't resist speaking to this gentleman, was Richard Urquhart from the Urquhart family of Gordon MacPhail. Now, they've had a lot going on in the last few months and years. They've been launching one of the oldest whiskies in Scotch. They've been building a distillery. They've been doing a lot. And so I thought, I need to catch a word with Richard to catch up on all the Gordon and MacPhail story and chat. I haven't seen him for a little while. Fellow sailor, loves sailing. And I see him on the sailing race course occasionally, but really nice to catch up with him in Chicago.
And it's funny how, Gordon, quickly, before we start the interview, how you probably live a few hundred miles away, but you've got to go to Chicago to a place called Delilah's to actually have a conversation with Richard.
Such is the way life is.
You're on a bit of a tour of America at the moment, in North America. Is that fair?
Yeah, we're traveling around, seeing people and spreading the word.
Selling whiskey?
Yeah, selling whiskey. Tell people what we're doing.
You're not just selling normal whiskey. You've been because you obviously famously bottled relatively recently the oldest single malt in the world?
At the time, it was the oldest.
Yeah.
But another company has now launched an 81-year-old.
They have.
But it was an 80-year-old, the oldest whiskey at the time when we launched it.
And what distillery was that from?
Glenlivet. So a cask filled by my great-grandfather and my grandfather in 1940. Matured for 80 years by 4 generations of the family. And then released as an 80-year-old single malt whiskey.
What strength was it?
So it's 44.9% in strength. We released 250 bottle decanters. Not bottles, decanters.
Decanters, everybody, decanters. That means, might be a little bit pricier.
Designed by a famous architect, David Adjay. This was his first kind of venture into whiskey and Scotch whiskey. And amazing design for a decanter and the packaging to go with it. So we had this piece of art designed by him. This really old whiskey filled by my great-grandfather. And we had this amazing, vibrant whiskey that was still so fresh after 80 years.
That is incredible because, your natural reaction could be a bit tired, a bit over-matured, whatever, but to have a whiskey that's as vibrant as that at that age is incredible.
Well, let's go back one step. It was 44.9% in strength. We released 250 decanters.
250?
The cask was half full. So for that to be, if you think about that for a second,
that's a good sign.
We had volume, we had strength. So we decided to bottle it. It wasn't the last few bottles. It wasn't at low strength. That was a proactive decision by MacPhail, by our team back home, to actually bottle that whiskey, and we felt it was at its peak.
A quick update on the Cairn, the new distillery, as we're just in Granton-on-Spey on the way into Speyside. Looks fabulous. How's that all coming on?
So we're getting close to completion. The first spirit is starting to come off the stills. The first official run will be later this month on character. So it's amazing for a family member to see our next legacy, our generation, to actually bring something back to the business and be in that position now to go, that is what we're leaving behind for Generation 5.
And that's very interesting because it's a very similar attitude to what we have at Ian MacLeod with Rosebank. That is a legacy, of course, as well. And you've got to remember that when you're building distilleries and things like that, it's not immediate, it's long-term. It's a long-term thing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we benefited by the foresight of my great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad, my uncle, my aunt. And we have Benromach Distillery as a result of that. Now it's our turn to lay something back down. And it's incredibly exciting to see the Cairn come to fruition. It's been years and years in planning, and now we're so close to spirit coming off and character, and then we've got to wait 12 years.
Or however long it is, so you create good whiskey.
Yeah. So that is something that we will look forward to, and incredibly exciting for us to be in that position. But great to be back, seeing consumers in the US, tell our stories, tell them about what we do, and hoping they enjoy and learn something about our whiskies.
Richard, thanks for the update from Gordon and MacPhail. We're a big fan of what you do. All the best, my friend.
Thanks, Gordon. It's a pleasure.
Fantastic.
I drove past the Cairn, Gordon, on the way to the Speyside, as you did.
Yes,
on the way to the Speyside
really
Festival.
come on.
It really has come on. It's going to be a big distillery. And what's important for me is that there's a golf course right behind it. And a wee fishery. So what a day that would be. A bit of fishing on the course and then into the Cairn.
I would I make sure you get that in the right order. I wouldn't do whiskey first, put it that way.
No. Whiskey and water doesn't fit. No, try to catch a fish.
Yeah, and then your golf could be an absolute nightmare. But yeah. No, really, really good. And then obviously I and you'll hear in the interview why we connected with these two, but fabulous ladies, Nicole Gilbert and Andi Ryan from J. Rieger, who you are drinking. And I tasted that at the Binnies event, and it was fabulous. And we connected with these couple because of the connection of Williams and Humbert in Spain.
So I'm here in Delilah's, and I met a really interesting lady earlier that we were talking about Oloroso sherry. And we were and it was three words that made us sort of connect, and it was Williams and Humbert. Just to sort of enlighten everybody, can you tell us your name and who you work for?
I love this. My name is Andi Ryan, and I work for J. Rieger & Co. from Kansas City, Missouri.
That's Kansas City, and you're producing great whiskey in Kansas?
Well, it's Missouri.
Sorry, Missouri, right on the border.
Yeah. You'll notice quickly, as Midwesterners, don't take kindly to that.
Yeah, get your geography right here. Yeah.
Yes. Know your state borders.
Know the borders.
Yes.
So it's Missouri.
Yes, Kansas City, Missouri.
And I tasted some of your whiskey earlier.
Yes.
Fabulous.
With our 15-year-old Oloroso sherry from Williams and Humbert.
Exactly, which is significant because obviously I know you had a Tamdu 15 earlier, which is uses sherry sometimes from Williams and Humbert, but talk us through the sort of philosophy of the business in terms of whiskey.
Our business. So we are a pre-prohibition brand. We were founded in 1887 in Kansas City, Missouri by a man named Jacob Rieger. And that was the era in American whiskey where rectified whiskeys were dominant, where we would blend fortified wines into new make whiskey, essentially because the American government was kind of an asshole and they would tax distillers the moment their booze would go to distill.
The British government was the same.
There's a reason we broke away from the Brits. There's a reason.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you've been at the Binny's event. You're at Whiskey Fest Chicago tomorrow night. What do you think is going to be the one people will go for from your range?
Our bottled in bond rye whiskey, our 6-year-old bottled in bond.
So being a rye whiskey, when you make whiskey with rye, the word you would associate with that generally is spicy, peppery.
Yes.
Is that the case, or is it softer, or?
I think because it was aged for 6 years, it definitely has a much more smooth approach. It's not that sharp rye bite, but it is a 96% rye mash bill. So
that's very high. What's the other 4%?
A little bit of barley.
Barley. There we go.
Yeah.
Obviously single malt, 100% malted barley, but you are now 96% rye.
Yes. Yeah, 96%. But fortunately, we were able to be patient and let it age for 6 years, which it's so good. It almost has that American bourbon characteristic from that oak because we did let it age for so long, and it has that nice, I get that eucalyptus green kind of flavor. Rye whiskey to me is a weird flavor to think of, but I always think of the color green. When I taste rye, I think green, and this has that fresh rye pumpernickel bread.
Green countryside.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's so good.
So I'm going to move on to your colleague.
I'm Nicole Gilbert.
And you work for the same business?
I do indeed.
Now I know having spoken to you both love what you do, what a great business you work for. You love a bit of Scotch as well, is that fair?
I think that's fair to say, yeah. That's putting it lightly, I'd actually say.
She's my Scotch teacher.
Okay.
She really is.
I spent almost the better part of a decade working for a Scotch bar in St. Louis, which is, at the time, COVID did change things for everybody, rather unfortunately, but at the time it was one of the biggest in the St. Louis area, and at the very least in Missouri, I think.
Are you going to go to Scotland?
Yes, it is. It is on the very, very short list of things I plan on doing. The owner of the Scottish Arms, the place that I work at in St. Louis, he is from Aberdeen, and so he came over.
You know what they say about Aberdeen? 50 Shades of Grey. It's quite a grey city, but nice.
I've heard that what's funny about him is that when he came to the States, he actually fell in love with barbecue, and now he has a barbecue restaurant as well, and it's particularly funny because he always talked about how it was always very grey in Aberdeen, and so
all the buildings are made of granite, so it's grey.
You just only occasionally have a nice day where you can drag the rusty grill out and throw some meat on it and whatnot and try to make it palatable. So he actually makes very good barbecue. He learned from the best. He actually would volunteer at barbecue competitions in Kansas City to learn how to do what he does. But he was a really tremendous boss. His name is Ali Nisbet.
Ali Nisbet, very Scottish.
Yes, very, very Scottish. I've heard some things about the name Nisbet in the what is it?
Do tell us.
What is it, Rab Nisbet or something? There was a
Rab C. Nisbet.
Thank you. I've been told about that, and it was explained to me, and I said it to him once and once only, and he gave me a look, and I never said it again because apparently he was made fun of relentlessly in his younger years. But yeah, he is very, very. He's very generous to his staff, and he actually took the general manager of the Scottish Arms to Scotland to meet with his family and everything, and just took him on a whirlwind tour of Scotland. So I'm hoping to get that same treatment someday.
So if you're in St. Louis, and you want to drink great Scottish whiskey, any whiskey, you should go to the Scottish Arms. Is that fair?
I would say so, yeah. Again, COVID did change things, so our selection is not as robust as it once was, but it's coming back. I say our as if I still work there. I'm full-time for J. Rieger and Company, but it does hold a piece of my heart very dear. And it's where I learned so much about single malts, and it's where I mean, my expertise really is in single malts as far as my whiskey knowledge.
And I know you're very, very, you love a bit of single malt. Favorite Tamdhu batch strength?
I wish I could revisit number 2 to compare it against the 4 that I had today. And I haven't had a chance to try 5 and 6, but I mean, I'd happily, sit down and go through the whole line.
We'll sort that out for you.
I would like that very much. I really do like the batch strength lineup. I think they're really, really good, and I really enjoyed selling people on them. I tend to like my single malts to be higher proof. Like, if you can get me something that's 92 plus, I really, really do think it comes out better in the end, for me, for my palate, I should say.
Fantastic. Look, great to have you on Whiskey Unscripted. Thank you very much for your wonderful insights.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I have to say, I'm quite jealous. I would have liked to have been at that bar.
I know, it's brilliant.
Some of those interviews.
It's a fabulous bar. It's a very social space, and it's generally a late night leave. And it was that night. The next night was Whiskey Fest in Chicago, which is on a Friday night, which is effectively their big sort of whiskey show. They do them all around the US, and it's run by Whiskey Advocate, which is the magazine over there, rival to Whiskey Magazine, you may say. And it's a big whiskey show where you have lots of stands, and it was a good show. Important for us to be there, I think, but really nice to just connect with a lot of people and get people's thoughts on some new whiskies over there. But before the show started, I've got a good friend, Marty Duffy, who is, a lot of people may have heard of Marty, former Master of Scotch, works with Glencairn, and really is Mr. Whiskey in Chicago. So just to finish off the trip to the US, I thought, let's get Marty's thoughts on Whiskey Fest Chicago.
So I'm sitting here in the Hyatt with Marty Duffy. Marty, it's just before Whiskey Fest. Now, those who may not know, Marty is a former Master of Scotch with Diageo and Mr. Whiskey in Chicago. Is that fair?
Yes, Mr. Whiskey. Mr. Chicago / Mr. Whiskey, yeah.
So, Marty, Whiskey Fest comes round, well, it seems to come round quicker every year, but how much do you enjoy this sort of whiskey week in Chicago?
I do. I always look forward to it. Then once it's here, I dread it because it is an endurance test. It is going out night after night after night, drinking lots of whiskey, and I'm not a young man anymore. I don't know. I think my liver actually escaped my body on Tuesday. It actually left. So I'm not even filtering the whiskey anymore.
So if anybody in Chicago happens to see us, yeah, we'll get it back to you. You also do a little bit of work for a certain glass maker. Would that be fair?
Yes, it's a little family-owned company out of Scotland. A little tiny third world country, Scotland. They make the wonderful Glencairn glass. Beautiful crystal whiskey receptacle. For all those who like to really appreciate the fine nuances of a good whiskey, whether it be Scotch or maybe Irish whiskey or maybe an American bourbon, huh? Yeah, or even a gin if you want. Yeah, we're not prejudiced. You can drink whatever you want. That's how we look at things.
Marty, great to see you and great to be here for Whiskey Fest. We'll share a dram later.
You bet, Gordo. I'm coming right to your table and crawling underneath it and sleeping there.
Nice. And again, he sounds like somebody you like to hang out with, I have to say. Very entertaining chap.
Yes, Marty is very entertaining. And, just a good friend of mine. Again, good to catch up with and get his view on his amusing view on whiskey in Chicago. This is, but then I went on to New York and did some things in New York, which were good, and came home feeling crikey. I haven't done this travel thing for a while, which was interesting. No, look, it was great. It was really, really good. But
Gordon, one more highlight of the trip.
Surely has to be William H Macy.
Yes.
I mean, to get to meet him, and what a wonderful guy. And he's going to come to Glengoyne. He's got my card. He's very keen to see how we do it over here. He was a gentleman in every sort of meaning of the word, and pleasure to meet him, and loved Tamdhu, which was nice.
Lovely. So, and Binny's on, just another ask you at the time, is it a big place?
Yeah, they're a big chain of about 50 stores in Illinois. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, you have independent stores in the US, you have bigger chain stores depending on the states, you have You have states that are government run, so the government buys the alcohol. I mean, every state is different, which is one of the challenges. But Illinois is Chicago, a big market, traditional whiskey market, obviously, with Al Capone and all that stuff, of course, around there, which you know a lot about. But you know, one of our big target cities is Chicago, so it was great to be there.
Yeah. Well, that's, Gordon, we've had lots of voices on tonight. Can I just say thank you to, well, I've had Chicago, we've talked New York, we've been in London, we've even been to Wishy. So can I just say thanks to Christopher Coates, and I'll say thanks to Derek Mather and Fiora, of course.
Well, I want to thank William H Macy again, Neil from Torabhaig, thank you. To Mike Miller of Delilah's, and you know, if you're in Chicago, go to Delilah's. You may remember Compass Box did a bottling of Delilah whiskey about 5 to 10 years ago. Richard Urquhart, Andi and Nicole from J Rieger, and Marty Duffy.
Hey.
So yeah, look at we haven't got a lot of our chat, but a great amount of interviews, just showing the world of whiskey to you, and we hope you enjoy.
But we'll see you for episode 6.
Yes, absolutely. See you then.
Bye-bye.
Congratulations on reaching the end of the episodes. And to say thank you, here's a little outtake.
Paul Mather of the Artisan restaurant, and lovely food. And at the end of the night, I managed to grab Paul, and in front of the assembled company, had a quick interview. And
is it not Derek?
Derek, yes.
You said Paul.
Let's start again.
On the whiskey trail,